Hi, this is Ben CB for razorsedge.com, and today we will talk about advanced preflop strategies. So today we will deal with merged and polarized 3-betting, and we will look at important factors for bluff 3-betting. Also, I will teach you when it is useful to bluff 4-bet, and in the last part we'll talk about how to generate more money with preflop raises out of position. Let's start with merged 3-betting. What is merged 3-betting in general? In a nutshell, we can sum up that a merged 3-bet range is value heavy, cause there are no air hands in this range. Here we have a quick example how a merged 3-bet range can look like. Of course, this is an extreme, cause the range is very tight, and this is a common button versus UTG 3-bet range. Of course, you could call King Queen, King Jack, Queen 10 and Jack 10 suited also, and then bluff 3-bet King Queen offsuit and King Jack offsuit, but this is more important in cash game. This example should just show you what a merged 3-bet range can look like. So a merged 3-bet range is a very wide value 3-bet range, and a merged 3-bet range contains many hands from the top of the folding range. So for an example, when we would flat call King X suited and we would fold King 10 suited, then King 10 suited has to be in our 3-bet range. When should we 3-bet merged, especially in hyper turbo 6-max sit and goes? This is appropriate when our villains call too many hands to 3-bets and 4-bet not enough. It's very unprofitable when we 3-bet Jack 10 suited and always get the 4-bet or the 4-bet jam very often, and he's not calling too many hands to 3-bets. Then we should 3-bet a hand like Ace Deuce, cause we have more blocker potential. So we should 3-bet merged when the villains are very call happy. Another important point, and this is a key topic of this video, is that we want to isolate the weaker players. And this is especially in the blind stage 10-20 the case. So when we have 25 big blinds and we want to isolate the weaker players. And I see there are many mistakes, but I think many players don't know they can extract more value in those spots, so that you can 3-bet lighter for value. We have a very good equity against the calling range from our opponent, cause hands like King Jack offsuit, Ace 10 offsuit, Ace 8 suited and Jack 10 suited generate full equity. Maybe a little less against fun players, but we have a good playability and equity against the calling range. And on the flop we have a high full equity too. In many situations we are ahead when we look at our overall equity against his calling range equity, cause they call so many hands to 3-bets, and that's the reason why we can make our 3-bet sizing very small, and we can 3-bet with hands that are strong enough against villain's range but too weak to shove. And now we look into some example hands. Okay, here's the first hand, and we have King Queen offsuit in the small blind. The cutoff is a weaker player, and he is a very loose player also. The second line in my heart are the raise first instats, so he raised around 50% range so far on the cutoff. And the button is another weaker player with a very high VPIP PFR gap. In this scenario, we should always squeeze. Reshoving against those loose ranges would be plus EV, but we can squeeze here, cause we have a very big advantage post flop and we are never dominated. Ace Queen, Ace King and Pocket Queens are usually shoving pre. The only problem is that sometimes they could trap Kings or Aces, but so many worse hands are calling and our King and Queen outs are always clean, and we can broke post flop when we hit our hand. On many boards we can take down the pot with a c-bet as well. So in this spot it is important to take down the pot with initiative, and it is possible that one of the players is folding. But in this scenario the cutoff shoves and we can fold our hand very easily. So in this spot we save chips, cause we did not reshove, cause we would be crushed against his calling range. So merged rebetting also includes our squeezes, so don't call with too many hands pre-flop. Search for spots in which you can squeeze a little bit lighter for value. Okay, next hand we have King Jack offsuit in the big blind. The cutoff is another very loose player, and now the small blind flat calls. And against the cutoff alone, I would have flatted this hand. The cutoff is on the loser side, but he is a regular. But against the regular, I would call this hand preflop, cause the most regs are more aggressive than a fish, and they would shove some hands that I want to play against postflop. Now the small blind flat calls and he is very loose and call happy. We want to isolate the small blind, and that's the reason why I think that squeezing is the best play in this spot. I would also squeeze with King 10 offsuit, King 9 suited, Ace 10 offsuit, Ace 9 suited, Ace 8 suited, and maybe even Queen 10 and Queen Jack offsuit. And he will continue with a lot of trash, so hands like 6-7 suited, 10-7 suited, King 5 suited, and we have a very good equity against this opponent post-flop, and we have position on him. But in this case both players fold and we take down a nice pot. Next hand, another very loose player open raises, and now we have the option to 3-bet or to flat. A good point for the 3-bet is we get many better hands to fold behind us, hands like King Queen offsuit or Ace Jack, and we isolate the fish and don't invite the whole table to come along. And we want to play heads up against this player type. Our sizing can be very small. He has just 20 big blinds and he is calling a lot to 3-bets. That's the reason why we 3-bet those hands. In this case, our opponent calls and we c-bet and we win the pot. If we flat called pre, then we have to fold the flop all the time. So when we 3-bet in the spot, we isolate his weaker range against us, cause he is shoving his stronger hands pre-flop. Even with Queen Jack, Queen 10 suited, I would 3-bet in this spot. Okay, now we have King Queen offsuit again and UTG open raises. He's a fun player. The stats will come soon and then you can see it. It is the same scenario. We 3-bet and he calls. And of course on this board we want to get all the money in. I want to go for max fold equity against this player type, and I don't have to be balanced in this spot. So I bet 130 on the flop that he folds small pairs or ace x hands, and I don't want him to float. Sometimes he will shove queen 9 or 8-9 suited, and we flip against a 10 or a jack. In this situation another fun player raises in middle position and we 3-bet again. I doesn't like my sizing, cause I don't want to play a huge pot with those hands. I think 70 or 80 is better with our entire range. With very weak regulars behind, we could also 3-bet our weaker hands small and our stronger hands bigger. On the smaller stakes with huge player pools, those spots don't occur too often that the same regular is sitting behind you. So the other players need a lot of sample size when they want to exploit you in this spot. He calls, and when we take a closer look at his stats, he's not that loose, but the combination of equity, fold equity preflop, and the fold equity on the flop makes this play very profitable. And also we get better hands behind to fold. Ace Jack for sure, even Ace Queen is very hard to play. Next hand, Jack 9 suited and UTG open raises. On the button we could flat call as well. I think I would flat call with Jack 10 suited in this spot, but with Jack 9 suited I prefer 3-betting. The player on the button is very loose too, and I don't like my sizing in this spot. This is a good board to push many turn cards, a 10, a spade, an 8. He has many 5x hands, or hands like ace tray, ace 4 that call once, or pocket 3s, pocket 4s, pocket 5s. And on the turn, these hands are often third pair and will fold to and shove. And that's the reason why I bet on the flop a little bit smaller. The pot is 382 on the turn, and we can shove for a little bit under pot size. And his broadways will fold to our small flop bet also. So if he has a hand like Queen 10, King Jack, or King Queen, he will fold to our small flop c-bet. Now we have another spot. This is not an easy situation. This player open raises, and the shove for 20 big blinds is not a good option. We have a very solid stack to play with on this table, and when we flat call, the big blind gets super good odds to call, and he will shove a wide range too. Cause now there's so much dead money in the pot, and that's the reason why we want to 3-bet here. I think 120 is enough. He will just always call here, and we don't inflate the pot too much. On this board, I think it is okay to check fold. He has many 8x and Jack X hands in his range, and many gut shots, open-ended straight draws, and he can peel hands like 6s, 7s, ace 10, and that's the reason why I think check folding is fine on this board texture. Even on a 10, we improve our equity, but I don't think we can shove, cause he improved to 2 pairs or a straight so often. But a very small c-bet is okay to just fold out his air, ace high, maybe a small pocket pair, and we still have some equity. So I think a very small c-bet is okay too. We can ship any ace on the turn for sure, cause I don't think he has too many ace x hands in his range. Maybe ace tray, ace 8 and ace jack suited. And ace jack, ace queen and ace king will usually shove pre. Okay, again king jack offsuit. We saw many hands with king jack and king queen now, and I would 3-bet these players up to jack 10 suited, maybe even jack 9 suited depending on the looseness of the fun player. And then hands like ace 8 suited, ace 7 suited, ace 9, ace 10 offsuit. This is, I think, a solid range. I don't like my sizing. 80 is more than enough. Okay, in this spot there's a good regular in the small blind, and I want to 3-bet my strong mate hands bigger, and that's the reason why I 3-bet my entire range with this sizing. Cause when I 3-bet 270 with my weak hands, he can always shove, and I have to fold all the time. At the stakes I play, I think many regulars are aware of that, but the 3-bet is way more profitable than the flat call. The hijack calls our 3-bet, and of course we are always going broke on this flop. They call all suited hands or even more, and we have a very good equity against this range. I think even king 9 suited and king 10 offsuit can you 3-bet in this spot. So in these spots you should try to get a little bit more value from your opponents. What does a little mean? I'm sure you can win a lot more in those spots, and that's why it is important that you don't flat call too many hands and play those spots more aggressive. Polarized 3-betting stands for 3-betting the nuts or nothing. So our 3-bet 3-bet range consists of very weak and very strong hands. Here you can see an example. We have a very strong value range and a very weak bluffing range. Our bluff 3-bet range is a blocker range, because we have many Ace-X and King-X hands in our range. We want to 3-bet polarized against aggressive 4-betters when we want to 3-bet against those opponents. And there are players with a high full to 3-bet stat, and when they continue, they 4-bet in 80 or 90% of the time. They flat nearly 0 hands, especially out of position, and that's the reason why we should 3-bet a range like this against regulars in position. So we have the top range and then our blocker hands. You can also 3-bet hands like Queen Jack offsuit or Jack 10 offsuit, cause most regulars don't call that wide out of position. When we 3-bet against regulars out of position, we should maybe add hands like Jack 9 suited, Queen 8 suited, or King 10 suited when we are in the small blind. Cause when they are in position, they will continue with more hands, and we want a higher playability for this case. So pay attention which player type you 3-bet, a regular or a fun player. And against a fun player, we don't want to 3-bet the low suited connectors or ace deuce offsuit. I think we want to bluff 3-bet very little in general, especially in the early and middle stage. As I told you, against 4 happy opponents you should 3-bet more polarized, and especially against opponents that are out of position. But playability is just a subordinate role, cause the villains don't flat that many hands to 3-bets, and we should construct our range very Broadway heavy, cause with these hands we block villains 4-bet range. But when you have the read that your opponent isn't folding too much to 3-bets, then you shouldn't bluff 3-bet that often. When we bluff 3-bet, which factors are important? The players behind. So for an example, when a maniac is behind, we shouldn't bluff 3-bet that often. Let's say MP1 open raises and we sit on the button and middle position has a full to 3-bet stat of 60 or 65%, and in the blinds is a maniac. He still wants to play many hands and he's 4-bet shoving many pocket pairs, and that's the reason why we can't just look at the full to 3-bet stat, cause there is a cold call and a 4-bet probability behind us, and then the bluff 3-bet isn't profitable anymore. When there are only racks behind us, we can bluff 3-bet lighter, and that's the same topic than my video course Resteals, cause when we have regulars behind, we can resteal lighter, cause they only overcall solid tight ranges, but a fun player can call hands like King Queen, King Jack, Ace 10 suited, and that's the reason why we should resteal tighter. And the same applies to our 3-bet game when we are not shoving our whole stack. Also important is our own image. When we have more sample, we can look at the full to c-bet stat in the 3-bet pot. Also many regulars have a very high full to c-bet stat in a 3-bet pot. They flat the 3-bet very often cause they're getting very good odds, but then they play super often check fold, and that's the reason for 50 or even 60% full to c-bet. And very often we only size 1/3 in a 3-bet pot, and we have a huge immediate profit in this case. So when you like to search for profitable spots, then take a closer look at some regulars. You have some work to do with this. So your villain has a low full to 3-bet stat, but a high full to c-bet stat. You should regardless bluff 3-bet with a wide range. Another important factor is the future game. So when we are the chip leader with our bluff 3-bet, we should take this spot. The bubble factor is also important. When there's a high bubble factor, we shouldn't bluff 3-bet too wide. Let's look into some hands now in which we could bluff 3-bet. The rack open raises to 40 and we have to think if we want to bluff 3-bet in the spot or not. I don't think we can call here against a solid range. With only Rex at the table, I think this would be a good bluff 3-bet, and his 3-bet stat, his full to 3-bet stat is high enough to make it profitable. In the next spot, I will talk a little bit more about the full to 3-bet stat and what is important. But I choose to fold cause in the small blind is a real maniac, and that's the reason why I don't want to have a bluff 3-bet range. And the open raiser is not folding a ton to 3-bets. He is folding a little bit more to 3-bets, but just a little bit. And that's the reason why I wouldn't 3-bet total trash. I would only 3-bet hands with good post-flop equity. And the maniac is shoving and calling many hands, even out of position, and that's the reason why I don't want to bluff 3-bet here. Next hand, similar scenario. UTG has huge full to 3-bet stats, as you can see in the third row, 80, 67 and 65. It is the perfect spot to bluff 3-bet, but we can bluff 3-bet here because in the blinds are two maniacs. And if the small blind is calling a 10% range and bluff 4-betting a 5% range, and for the big blind applies the same, then this reduces the full to 3-bet from UTG, so it reduces the probability that we take down the pot. When we play heads up against him, we should win the pot in 80% of the time, but with the two maniacs we have to deduct 20-30%, and then his stat is only at 45 or 50%. So only in 45 or 50% of the time we take down the pot. Maybe they're even more aggressive and we have a 4-bet probability of the regular behind of 3, 4, 5%, and he can overcall with a 1 or 2% range, and that's the reason why it is not profitable anymore, or it's super marginal. And when you have very weak players at your table, you shouldn't go for those marginal spots. So don't just look at his full to 3-bet stat and 3-bet all the time. You should always calculate the cold call and the 4-bet probability behind you. And that's the reason why I don't want to have a bluff 3-bet range in this spot. I think I would flat this hand on the button, cause I want the two weak players in the pot, and I think they would overcall very often. And in this case the big blind shoves, and you can see they both have very high 3-bet frequencies. The big blind has a 100% 3-bet range against a button open so far, and the small blind is also very 3-bet active. Let's move on to the next hand. The player in UTG folds too many hands to 3-bets, but the button is a very loose player, and I don't want to have a bluff 3-bet range here. The small blind is a very loose regular, and he is able to 4-bet shove a wide range. Maybe he's trying to exploit me, but it is very easy to re-exploit him, and you can see he has a very high full to 3-bet stat in every position, from 62 to 72%. And this is what I mean when I talk about elastic ranges. In this spot we should only value 3-bet, but when there is a regular behind we can bluff 3-bet with a huge range, maybe up to 30%. We have to adjust our range in every spot. It's the same thing with open raising. Which player types are behind, and then you can play very profitable ranges. Let's move on with bluff 4-bets. Against aggressive regulars, bluff 4-bets are very profitable. When you have regulars with high 3-bet stats and high full to 4-bet stats behind you, you can bluff 4-bet very light. You can shove, or you can non-all-in 4-bet, especially with 23 to 25 big blinds. It is possible without committing your whole stack. I think you can use hands like Ace-8 offsuit, Ace-9 offsuit, Ace 10 offsuit, King 10 offsuit, King Jack offsuit, and Queen Jack offsuit for a non-all-in 4-bet. So when we are in position and we min raise to 40 and the other player out of position 3-bets to 90, then we can 4-bet to 140 or 150 and we can fold 2 and shove. And we can 4-bet shove small pockets or the suited connector hands or suited high card hands. Some from you may be surprised that small suited aces are not qualified for bluff 4-bet shoving. And we look at it soon in an example. Against very aggressive 3-better, suited aces will become profitable too. But against players which 3-bet a lot and fold a lot to 4-bets, you will see that the range looks very strange. Let's start with the first example. We min raise from the hijack and the button 3-bets, and now we need the 3-bet and the fold to 4-bet stats. The fold to 4-bet stat is in the top right corner, and it's the purple stat, and the yellow stats are the 3-bet stats against the different positions. So we have the 3-bet ranges against under the gun, against middle position, against the cutoff, against the button, and against the small blind. And now we have the question if we want to shove or fold, cause calling is not an option. You can see that he 3-bets very loose against the button, 17.5%, against the cutoff 10%, and against middle position 13%. So he's capable of 3-betting 10 or 11% overall. And we can also see that his fold to 4-bet stat is way too high. So it is likely that he 3-bets more than he should. For an example, the cutoff is a beta regular and he has a lower fold to 4-bet stat. We could not exploit this opponent so easily. I created a very bad scenario for us. I gave him a very polarized 3-bet range because I think he knew that I'm folding or shoving. So when we give him ace deuce to ace 5 suited and offsuit 10s plus, ace queen offsuit plus for value, then you can see that we should shove a very strange range. And many players play this spot wrong. They 4-bet shove always ace 5 suited or ace deuce suited, and they think that these are good hands to 4-bet shove, but often that's not the case. We should rather shove 7-5 suited than ace 5 suited. And when we look at the EV, you can see it. So we should shove all the pairs and the suited broadways. His 3-bet stat is higher, and I think he can also 3-bet those hands. And now his 3-bet stat is at 11.3%, and cause he's on the button, it is possible that he 3-bets a little bit more. With these high 3-bet and high fold to 4-bet stats, you can shove very light. And of course, the suited aces are profitable as well. Many players are extremely unbalanced and flat hands like ace queen, cause when the stacks are going in, you're in general not way ahead. Tens is a very standard 3-bet call, because many players are able to shove a small pocket pair and you have a better equity than with ace queen. So in this scenario, you can see that we can shove any two. Of course, we shouldn't do this, cause it has a high impact on the meta game and on the future game with this regular, but we should shove the low pockets and suited high cards. We can also 4-bet some blocker hands in this spot, cause his 3-bet's so small. We can 4-bet to 160 or 170 and then fold 2 and shove. Similar scenario, we have a pocket pair and a regular in the small blind 3-bets, and you can see at his stat that he 3-bets 9% against middle position, and he is folding in 80% of the time to 4-bets overall. So we should shove very light in this spot. As a second exploit, we could flat queens plus and ace king suited, cause he has this huge lead. So we could slow play these hands, and you should try to exploit your opponent with value hands as well. And of course, pocket fives are no-brainer shove against this opponent. When we exploit our opponents very hard, it is clear that we are extremely unbalanced too. But as long as our opponents are not exploiting you, or you readapt fast enough, that is very important in this spot. Let's move on to the next hand. We have ace-8 suited, and of course we open raise, and the cutoff 3-bets. This spot is a little bit more interesting, cause his full to 4-bet stat is lower. His full to 4-bet stat is 46%, and he 3-bets against the cutoff 14%, and I think that he will 3-bet more hands from the button than from the small blind. So I think in this spot he will 3-bet around 15%. At first we give him a value range that he is 3-bet calling with. I think he will reshove some hands like tens or ace king. And he can flat some hands too. I don't have any specific history with him. There are some racks which 3-bet call ace jack suited, but I think he will flat call some hands. Okay, I think he will 3-bet tens and reshove nines and eights, maybe sevens, but he can flat sevens too. So now we have the value range and we need to find some bluff hands. I think we should include ace king in a 3-bet range, otherwise the results will be too good for us. But I think with sevens, eights and nines he will usually shove pre. And now we have this range. I think that's a little bit too loose, cause his 4-bet stat is not that high. So now I remove some hands that we get a 9% range, cause his value range is 4%. And with his low full to 4-bet stat, he can 3-bet call nines and ace jack suited too. So his value 4-bet range is 5% now, and we have to add 4.35% bluffs. And we have a very easy fold with ace-8 suited. I think I got distracted by his 3-bet stat, but it is important what he's folding to 4-bets. Maybe he's reshoving many hands, and this is the reason for his high 3-bet stat. So his small 3-bets are stronger, and we have to pay attention to that. I think I did a mistake there, and the full to 4-bet stat is always dependent on the 3-bet stat. And in this example you can see that suited aces are not a good shoving hand. We can't shove too much against this opponent. Maybe king queen and king jack suited, but I think it was wrong to push ace-8 suited. When I review my game, I see those mistakes and write it in my diary. I write down a rough range and then I train myself with ranges and get more confident. When I see that I make a lot of mistakes in this spot, then I mark those spots for the next 7 days, and I look that I always play the correct ranges and don't make any mistakes in the future. You should use this strategy for the most other spots also, so for post-flop spots, for shoving spots, or for calling spots, but especially those bluff 4-bet spots are very good to analyze with IC Miser. Let's move on to the next point, preflop raises out of position. In my opinion, too much completion is going on, so in the small blind the most players isolate not enough strong hands, and the most players check their big blind too often, and I think we should raise loser for value in this spot. There is so much money lying around. The problem is that many players don't want to go out of their comfort zone. They go the easy way and check and look at the flop, and with this playing style they are way too passive. Let's look at some example hands. UTG is a fun player and open limbs, and I think with this hand it is pretty clear that we should raise, and most players will raise this hand. But I think we should also raise hands like King 10 offsuit, King 9 suited, King 8 suited, Queen Jack, Queen 10 suited. He limps many hands that we dominate even with those hands. I would raise Queen 10 offsuit and Queen 9 suited for the bottom end, and I would shove my pocket pairs pre-flop. So I would only raise hands with a good playability post-flop. We raise and he calls, and on this flop I just give up. This just smashes his limping range, and he has so many straight draws, gut shots, pairs, and so on. I don't think we should bet the turn. He can have a hand like 5-6 or 5-7, and on the river it's the same thing. He shoves and we fold. This is also a very interesting spot. The button is a fun player and he's going all in, and the small blind is a fun player. You can see it on his stats, but he's a bigger fish with a lot of post-flop leaks, and he calls behind, and we should always raise with the range I mentioned the hand earlier. He will call so many hands cause the odds are very good, so we should always raise here. I think 90 or 95 is even better. And now he jams, and he will usually shove his strong hands, and we are rarely dominated post flop. And when we had just called pre, we would had a tough spot post flop, cause we would always bet the turn and the river against a weaker opponent. In this spot I see many players check, especially against an 84-16 player. I would raise till Queen 8 suited. On these dry boards we have a very high fold equity, and when we check and he bets we have to fold. So pay attention that you take the initiative out of position with your stronger hands. King 10 suited is a clear value raise against the open limper. The big blind calls and he is a regular, so he's calling with a lot of suited broadways. And when we get it in on this board, we are usually crushed, and we are only slightly ahead against his draws. He's going broke with Ace 10, Ace Jack and diamonds, and we're splitting against these hands, but we are crushed against his value range. And I would bet call against UTG, cause he's a fish and he can push with a worse king, so I wouldn't fold my hand against this player. Next hand, the cutoff limps and the small blind limps as well. We should raise to get the hand heads up against the weaker player, and we get a very nice flop. This time the hijack open limps and we have Queen Jack, and we should raise here. I think 70 is enough, and you can see on his stats that we lose money when we are not raising. This board isn't the best, but he can have worse Jack X hands like Jack 9, Jack 10, Jack 6 suited, Jack 5 suited. Now he min raises, and I think we are often beat in this spot. I don't know what I've done in this spot. You'll experience some tough spots, that's for sure, but long term you make so much more money with it. So we shove, and he is folding. Okay, the last hand, the hijack limps. Again, a fun player, and we should raise again. This board is not the best board, but I think checking is a good idea. When I had not the king in clubs, I would bet. So you should always think if you want to check or if you want to bet, how many bet turn cards are in the deck, or how difficult will it be to play the turn. And our hand will play very good on the most turn cards, cause the 10 isn't bad. Every club and every ace is not that terrible, cause we have a gut shot. But the ace is the worst turn card for our hand, cause with just second pair we should pot control. When the board is Jack 8 tray, and we have 8-6, I would bet, because there are so many draws and overcards, and we are out of position, and this spot is very hard to play, and we should rather bet. But on this board there are not that many turn cards which hurt our equity. Of course, we call the flop, and the turn is a blank. When he ships, it is super ugly, but I think I would fold. We block a flush draw, so don't make hero calls when you block villain's draws. And we block hands like King 10 as well. The river is a blank, and we should value bet. And he calls with 6 deuce suited. Yes, he can level himself, cause a draw busts with 10-9 or flush draw, but our line makes no sense with a draw. We would always bet the draw. And we take down a nice pot, so it is important to raise a hand like King 10 offsuit, Queen Jack offsuit. Even hands like 10 9 suited or Jack 9 suited are often in my raising range. So look that you raise a bit looser in those spots, and you earn more money by doing it. When you realize now that you are missing a lot of things in the past, you should start with bluffs rebetting polarized ranges against other regulars. You have less tough post-flop spots. Concentrate a few days on this topic and look at 5 to 10 hands before each session. Analyze through the complete hand, and you have to pay attention to the players behind you, and you have to include all the stats. So try to automate all those things, and after that you should try to 3-bet lighter for value with a merged range against fun players. So isolate them more frequently and cold call less. This topic is a little bit more complicated, and after that you can concentrate on the open raises out of position. Depending on your skill development, you can combine merged and polarized 3-betting against fun players and learn those two topics together. This is very individual, and you should try to build your own study plan. And if you notice that you played this spot automatic and very good in-game, so you 3-bet automatically and looked at the people behind you in a second without concentrating on it, then you knew that you did something right and you can move on with the next topic. After that, you can try to include more bluff 4-bets in your game. I think in the lower and micro stakes many players are very unbalanced, cause they 3-bet more, but they 3-bet not that wide for value, and that's a point in which I differentiate the mid from the high stakes racks. Especially at the mid stakes, the players can't go that light for value, and the 3-bet range is often nuts or air, and they don't 3-bet ace queen versus MP on the button. They flat call this hand way more often, and on higher stakes against loser regulars, they can 3-bet ace queen there for value. So they're able to 3-bet call hands like 9s, 10s, ace-jack suited, or big blind against the button. You will see 3-bet calls with hands like ace-10, and you can't 4-bet bluff that many hands against this range. And at the lower stakes, it is often very unbalanced, and therefore you can make the one or another 4-bet bluff more, but this is opponent dependent, and you have to try to get better in these spots. Okay, and now we're finished with this video. I think you have a lot of new content. I wish you good luck, and this was Ben CB for RazorsEdge.com.